In a world where military precision meets mindful awareness, how can practices rooted in compassion and focus shape the future of our service members' mental resilience? Today, we're diving into the groundbreaking intersection of mindfulness and the military with two incredible guests.
Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness.
This week on Men Talking Mindfulness, we're thrilled to welcome Lieutenant General Walter Pyatt and Dr. Amishi Jha. Lieutenant General Pyatt's career has spanned decades of distinguished service, from leading over 20,000 personnel as commanding general at Fort Drum to shaping policies as the Army Staff Director. Lieutenant General Pyatt has been a pivotal advocate for integrating mindfulness into the military, emphasizing its role in improving well-being and resilience among soldiers. Now, as the CEO of the Wounded Warrior Project, he's driven by his commitment to helping veterans find renewed purpose and support. Joining him is Dr. Amishi Jha, a renowned neuroscientist, researcher, and associate professor at the University of Miami. Dr. Jha's work explores the science of attention and mindfulness, with her research funded by the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Defense, and others. She's made substantial contributions to how mindfulness training can strengthen cognitive resilience and manage strength. Her insights have benefited not only the military, but also educators, health professionals, and leaders across many sectors. Today, together, they'll unpack the power of mindfulness in one of the most demanding environments, our armed forces. Walt, Amishi, welcome to the show. We're so pumped to have you.
It's great to be here.
We're excited to be here. Yeah.
And Will,
great
good
to have
see
you guys.
you, brother.
Yeah, I am here, John. Good to have you guys here today. I'm excited for this conversation. This is the most esteemed general we've had on the show so far. So thank you for joining us. I mean, it always feels good. And I got to say, a little secret, John gets a little nervous with a big general in the house.
Again,
he does. He really
it's the
does.
05 in me.
He really does. So we're gonna eventually take a one breath practice to help calm him down. So we're just gonna do that grounding practice to help John get centered and focused, so we can all have a really good conversation. Sorry, John. Right?
No, I love it, man.
Anyway, good. Let's exhale the breath all the way out. Let it go. Let it go. Maybe close the eyes and really hit the bottom of that breath. Take one big giant inhale in. A little bit more. Let's hold that breath for a little 3, 2, 1. And exhale the breath all the way out. Fantastic. And hey, thank you all for being here, for tuning in, for sharing our podcast, for helping us grow, maybe even leave us a review, and for becoming more mindful. Let's jump in.
Right.
John, you're going to kick us off today.
All right. Well, again, Amishi, Walt, thank you so much for being here. We're excited. And I'll start off with Walt. How did you first come to see mindfulness as a powerful tool for service members? And then what inspired you to champion it across the Army?
Well, I've never been called a steam, so I'll start there. But I did come in. I did come in the Army as a private, and 42 years serving in the Army. I guess some would think or want to hope that they'd be remembered for some heroic battlefield episode, but instead I'm remembered as someone who brought meditation and mindfulness to the Army.
Wow,
that's
powerful.
I'm pretty proud of it, really. But it's really because of this lovely woman we have on with us today, Amishi, because I met her in 2010. I'd just gotten back from another deployment, this time in Iraq, and after 9/11. I was on the every other year cycle, like many of us were. And every time we came back home, we would do things to reintegrate soldiers, and it always failed. We'd watch warriors just have difficulties dealing with coming back to the society they fought so hard to protect. They just felt like they didn't belong. And so we kept doing over and over again. We do this every single time. Finally, from a good friend of mine who was an Army doctor at the time, said, would you be willing to try something different? And he knew of some folks who wanted to do a study using mindfulness to help soldiers then try to regulate and reduce stress and increase attention and be able to deal with complex environments, in a better way. And it's like, well, that's kind of what soldiers do. Let's try it. And then, so we were back. We thought it would be a way to reintegrate into society. We thought it was something that we desperately needed. We quite frankly, were desperate, and we were looking for anything that would help do it better than what we'd been doing. And I met Amishi that day. She came into our headquarters, and myself and the sergeant major of the brigade were sitting across the table from her, and she started talking about explaining, how some people deal with stress, and when they have very difficult positions, they go throughout the day performing many tasks without even recalling what they're doing. She used an example of backing out of a garage, driving into work, never, hooking up your seatbelt, not even remembering any of those tasks. And pretty important when you're driving a car. But we didn't really hear that. What we heard was someone who understood us exactly. She described what Sergeant Major Tony Marrero, a good friend of mine, she described what him and I were personally going through. Like, we were just handling so much complexity and not really being in the moment. We were thinking about what we did wrong the last deployment. We were thinking about the next deployment, what we needed to do. And we knew if we were thinking this way, our soldiers certainly were. And that this was somebody who had a path that we think we wanted to explore immediately. We were immediately sold. We didn't even know what it was. We didn't even know it was mindfulness. We didn't know any of that. We just knew that she understood us, and we connected immediately. I think we were scheduled for maybe 30 minutes. I think we went well beyond that. And I tried to introduce Amishi to what it meant to be a soldier serving in 3rd Brigade Combat Team in the 25th Infantry Division, and what we went through, because I could see already we had somebody here that had something we needed to know. And that's how it started, but it didn't work out. It didn't end well, because her study wanted to have about 200 of our soldiers, and I didn't make the cut, so I felt a little bit like I was ousted.
Didn't win for you.
And so, but I eventually said, okay, I want to be taught, and I want to be part of this. I know I'm not part of the study. And what we found immediately is that this wasn't something to help us reintegrate. This is something we should be doing pre-deployment, during deployment, and help post-deployment. That this, for people who deal in high stress, high complex environments, I don't know of anyone that does anything more complex than a warrior, right? You're put into situations, life or death. You have to make decisions in split seconds, decisions that are witness to the worst of humanity, and you've got to bring values and rule of war to bear in seconds, and it has a toll on you. And how do you deal with such a thing? And training isn't enough. The physical training, the training on how to shoot a weapon, how to do push-ups, be physically fit, wasn't enough. The thing that was impacted the most, and the thing we used the most, was our mind. And we just weren't really training the mind. So Mishi, by introducing us to that, she unleashed a lot of things for me. I was excited, and as I trained up on it, I began to see results almost immediately. And I'll just give you the example that I tell you all the time. Is just practicing within a few days, I started to realize the power of being in the moment, the power of just listening to people, not trying to solve. So when I went home, I did what husbands rarely do. I listened to my wife.
That's where you're going.
I did. I remember it to this day. It was so clear. And my wife, I just kept remembering, she was telling me things, and I wasn't trying to solve the problem. But I remember very clear, vividly, that what a beautiful voice she has. And I was just there in that moment, and I was listening to her, and it was just the power of being there. And then playing football, catching football with my son, Josh. And he looked at me, and this is back in 2010 when we still had Blackberries. I don't remember, might remember this. But he said, "Dad, what's wrong?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, you're not on your Blackberry, like doing work emails while trying to throw ball." And I kept thinking, how many times was I there with Josh or my wife, Cynthia, and I wasn't really there? And if that's with my family, that means so much to me, but put that in a life or death situation, we really need to be there. And I think my wife said it best before I met Amishi, but it resonated throughout. She told me in my many years after 9/11, I deployed, and as I said, I was about every other year I was deploying to either Afghanistan or Iraq. And Cynthia told me, she said, "Walt, don't deploy until you deploy." And just think of the power of that. And John, what that means. I mean, it's just you're always you want to think ahead. You want to prepare. You're thinking about what you did wrong last time, but to be there with your family and even with your unit to train for the right things, to be there to get everybody else ready for the difficult task ahead, and to take advantage of the times that you're really home. Be home. So that was a lot, but it was a big moment in my life. I mean, it really was. I'll forget Amishi sitting across that table in that conference room, and within seconds, it was probably the best decision a sergeant major and I ever made as brigade commander, as a brigade command team, is to pursue something that the Army didn't recommend, and a lot of people were doubtful of why we were trying to do it. But I think it certainly helped change my life, and I think is helping change many warriors' lives.
It's changed mine for sure. Changed mine, and as I say, it's not only changed mine, but I truly believe that it saved my life. So I love what it is you guys are doing as a team, as a dynamic duo there. But I'll turn it over to Will.
Well, you never really forget the moment that you wake up, because it's just so profound. And what I'd like to hear from you, Amishi, is I would like to hear about some of the benefits and stuff. But I think we can kind of wrap that in to the pitch that you gave to Walt, of how to implement this in the military. I mean, it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, here you are, in this conference room, and in 30-minute meeting, it's just like, oh, she's, we'll listen to her, Instead it goes on to like actually having a massive influence in the military, which is huge. So give us that pitch.
Yeah.
Please.
Well, I'll tell you that that pitch had been practiced for over a year.
Like a good pitch is, right?
Not just privately. I mean, I had briefed, leader after leader after leader in the military. So just to get kind of place where we were, and it does wrap into what motivated us to want to even do this project. Why we even, I'm a neuroscientist, right? I study the brain's attention system in my lab. And what I knew from that is that any kind of high stress, high demand circumstance will degrade attention. Yet the thing we know will be needed for the challenges that service members face and that many other professionals face is their attention. And mainly that's because it basically controls almost every single thing we do. It controls and impacts how we think, how we connect with other people, how we regulate our emotions. So I became very motivated to try to bring this to service members, and in the same kind of time frame, and wrote my first set of large grants. We'd done a wonderful project, a pilot project with a Marine unit that said, yeah, this is a beneficial approach. But we'd never gone big. So I gave it a shot. We wrote a couple of big grants. So I had $2 million in funding from the Department of Defense. But one wake-up call that I learned after receiving those grants is they're not going to connect you with leaders or units that will actually receive the training. And that was kind of like, what? And so how many people did I know in the military that were actively in active duty? Zero. I knew zero people.
Wow.
And so the notion of even going in and talking to folks in this, it felt like a completely different world with a completely different, set of norms and language, et cetera. But I was able to start making some inroads, at least make some contacts, start going base after base. And it was a lot of no's, a whole year of thanks, ma'am, no thanks. And a lot of the challenges were tied to this weird thing called mindfulness, which, no, we're not interested. But really the challenge was the amount of time we were asking for, because it was a big project. So we were asking for 24 hours of training time over 8 weeks and about 30 minutes a day where we want people to practice. And I was going to be building a brainwave recording lab on the military base, right? So that's a lot.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, but it's like, what? No thanks. So maybe I can give you an hour in an afternoon. We got a lot of that.
Right.
So
if they understood the return on investment, oh my gosh.
Right. None of that, right? So what I meant by the pitch had a long opportunity to get honed, it's true. And so by the time I was able to brief Walt and the leadership team, we were kind of desperate ourselves, like, oh my gosh, is this ever going to go?
And two desperate groups meeting one another.
I never felt from the moment I first met Walt that this was kind of a normal briefing. Like they're checking a box by meeting with me. I didn't feel that. I mean, first of all, we'd traveled all the way to Hawaii. This was at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. So it was a big investment of our time. And they knew that. So, I mean, I even recall, I'm not telling about the pitch, but I'm just kind of setting the scene a little bit of like where we're at. The first thing he did isn't just go, I wasn't just led to the conference room sort of blindly. I mean, he met us downstairs. We walked up, and before we even sat down to have the meeting, he took us to the remembrance room that they had. And that was very, very powerful. Again, remember, I really had very little interaction with the military at that point. And to see not only the preciousness of remembering each of those that were lost, but seeing that there were pictures of people that were, Iraqis and people from Afghanistan that were their partners there. That meant like something was different here, and I could tell like this is not a check the box moment. So when we finally sat down to talk, I felt very ready. And the pitch is essentially what I've already said to you, that we know that attention is extremely important. And one of the other things that we know is that most of us aren't paying attention most of the time. So 50% of our waking moments, our attention is not in the task at hand, right? And it won't even, the more challenging part is that we're not even aware of it. So the kinds of circumstances that we talk about could be innocuous. Putting on your seatbelt, so what if you don't remember it? Right? Driving when there's no issues, no problem. But you don't know when you're going to need your attention. You don't know when you need to be fully there because the moment requires it. And how can you make your mind ready so that when that moment arrives, you are fully there? How can we train the brain to pay better attention because under stressful circumstances, it will be less likely to be available? And that was the conversation. It was the need that we felt was probably the case that could be beneficial. And it became a very organic conversation regarding the lived experience of people that had just been through this. They felt it, they were seeing it. And then the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah.
Good history. Good history for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I started practicing, Walt, for kind of a similar reason that you had mentioned, is that coming back off deployment after seeing loss, after seeing combat, it had definitely affected me. And I believe, like I said before, mindfulness not only changed my life, but quite literally saved my life. But when I had it introduced to me by a counselor, I laughed at him because I thought, I was this badass special operator that, this stuff wasn't for me. And then he kind of flipped the tables and he sold it to me as a performance enhancement, right? He was like, hey, it's going to help you to think more clearly. You can be more focused, have more situational awareness. The byproduct for me was that it helped me to address the anxiety, the post-traumatic stress injuries that I had. Kind of a two-pronged question, if you will. Mindfulness, it's clearly associated with compassion, with calm. And what you mentioned before was helping your soldiers come back from deployment. Like when we would come back from deployment, we would do what's called the neck up or the check up from the neck up, right? Is hey, how's your brain? How are you doing? And guys would blow that off. Guys would be like, hey, as soon as I can get back to training, I'm just going to say whatever I needed to say so that I can get through this. But it sounds like you've implemented something much more powerful than that to address that. Now, that said, in addition to that, I understand we want to help the warriors be more focused and lethal. So how do you reconcile using mindfulness, again, associated with compassion and calm, to make American service members more lethal on the battlefield?
Yeah, well, war, I explain it this way. War is the absolute worst of humanity. And yet it takes, good young men and women to wage it, or else, because the alternative is not acceptable. So sad, it's part of what we have to do. And you take, especially the American military, folks who have raised with great values of humanity, and then they're exposed to the worst of humanity, and it's difficult. But the tools that we have, all the values we have, allow us to maneuver and operate in these really evil, difficult places and clashes of cultures we don't understand. So we take our values to war with us. We take compassion to war with us. American warriors have always done this. I mean, they've always done it. And before I didn't know, like meeting Amishi and discovering mindfulness, it was like meeting a long lost brother I never had, but I always talked to in the night. I was always writing poetry and always expressing myself, and throughout my entire career, and especially after 9/11, being deployed, trying to identify. You're seeing people in Afghanistan try to carve out an existence where nothing existed, and then being controlled by some very evil people. So there was a goodness there, that it wasn't all evil. It was humanity struggling and being oppressed by evil people, and there was good for us to do, and we couldn't just just displace it all and say, this is all the enemy. It wasn't. It was just everywhere you went, you couldn't tell where the enemy was. So the way you operated, the way you maneuvered is by trying to recognize where the threats were, but always understanding that most of what you were seeing was not threatening. And the threat would only expose itself at a time that they thought they had the strength. So you had to connect with the culture. You had to connect with the human side of the Afghan people or the Iraqi people, wherever you were, in order to do your mission. It was part of it. And I think it made us more valuable. I've said over the years that compassion is more powerful than bullets. And it challenged folks a lot. And I also said we could win this war without killing one more person. But I wanted to challenge the thinking of the warrior that was faced with this. So killing wasn't the answer, and killing wasn't going to be the way we were going to win. Understanding and building stability and security while using sometimes, and all too often, lethality with very surgical precision, so we weren't impacting the very people we came to help liberate. And when you indiscriminately use violence, you would have the opposite effect of what you were sent there to do. So it's part of it. And I think every warrior culture has always had this yin and yang. And in Hawaii, that we had they call it the lua, and it was very part of Hawaiian culture. That you have to understand the sun goddess and the moon goddess, both together. The lethality and compassion are what make the warrior the best warrior that they can be. It's part of what we are. And I think warriors identified with that, identified with this performance part, as you mentioned, because like I chuckled because every time we redeployed, everybody knew what to tell the psych to get out of there so they can get on their pass and get back to duty.
Right.
And I remember one time not doing that as a battalion commander. I came back and I answered every question. And I was locked down with 3 psychiatrists for about 6 hours, wondering like, what do you mean? And I questioned, I said, do you not realize where we've been? I said, the fact that these folks can get out of here saying this stuff means you don't understand what we're doing. And I felt obligated to let them know what our warriors did experience. I mean, they're not coming back, psychopaths or anything, but we need to help them deal with the inhumane things that they witnessed and sometimes participated in. I mean, you do horrible things. They may be right or authorized by the rules of war, what you had to do, but you do them and you witness horrible things, or you couldn't prevent horrible things. And then you come back with the loss of friends and buddies and loved ones, and you quickly find out when you get back that the hardest part of surviving is living. And we're not we're helping them through that journey, through that path home. That's what they need. And they need it because they did what they had to do because that's what the warrior is. But that's not who they are inside. There's this brilliant human being that stood up and tried to help us with our most hour of need. And they do such incredible things, but it sticks to you. I mean, it has an impact on you, as it should. If it didn't, I don't think you would be human. So I think it was an easy translation to make to warriors to say a warrior's more than just good with your weapon. A warrior can apply lethality, but also apply compassion and build stability and have respect for human life, because that's the American soldiers, warriors have done this throughout our history. It's our greatest strength as a military. It is really, in my mind, it's our greatest strength, and that's how you win. Nobody really wins through killing. You might read that in a history book or something, but that's not the way it works. We all know that. Yeah. And so to train these folks for the complex environment they're going to get into, they need this type of work. They need to be exposed to this and understand this, where these emotions are coming from, where the sense of heightened stress that can distract you. At the moment you need to be at your very best, you cannot be thinking of something else, and you cannot be overwhelmed with a situation, or you're going to make the wrong decisions. And what I found, mindfulness resonated with them, that they could be calm when everything else wasn't.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. We talk about that a bunch, like, being calm amidst the chaos. And it seems like you created like a discerning lethality. You know what I mean? It's like when to like really take that big step of like really being lethal. Well, how about you just take us back a little bit, Walt, and like, so you have this meeting with Amishi, and, it's just like, oh my God, yes, we need this. And then how do you bring it in, to the ranks and into your soldiers, and what kind of skepticism where you're meeting? Because like, one of the things that John and I do on the show is we're constantly trying to debunk all these misconceptions about mindfulness. I mean, John said the first time that he heard about it, he laughed in the dude's face.
Sure,
you know what I mean? So how clever did you need to be in order to, help your people? Yeah.
Well, it was 2010. So we had a lot of us that had been deployed since 2001. So many of us have just done our 5th deployment or whatever, and we've been gone for years at a time. And we've seen the clash of, what the war really looked like, what the war on terror really looked like. And it wasn't like anything you saw on TV. The enemy did not wear uniforms. It was a sea of many times evil. You could see, humanity's worst, but you also saw sometimes humanity's best. And I think what I found in warriors is they became the best of humanity because they saw the worst of it. So it wasn't like kicking down a door that was locked, and it was great, as you would expect. The most warriors, I'm not going to do this. This is weakness. It was explained as a performance enhancement. So there was curiosity, especially when they know that professional athletes would do this. If this makes me better, I'm a little curious. If it doesn't work, it's on you now, Amishi, to prove to me that it works as a warrior. So they came in at a little doubtful, but open to something that would make them better performing. And so when she scoped out the study, we immediately went to, it wasn't going to be open for folks who weren't going to be here for the next deployment. That's kind of how we got there. We needed people that were going to be here. And then the unit was scheduled to go, we got back from Iraq, scheduled to go back to Afghanistan in a year. So we'd have time to train a cohort, have them deploy, have them use it while deployed, have them come back. So that would really meet the body of her study. So it kind of changed the outlook. So instead of just saying, I need this to help reintegrate better and come back from war, it became quickly, we said, oh, no, we need to do this to see how goodness it will have in our pre-deployment training, deployment, and redeployment. And so I think that helped frame it. So warriors thought, okay, I'm not doing this from some side off. This is going to help me prepare for the next upcoming high stress mission that I'm going to have to be a part of. Although, yeah, there was a lot of people that put doubts in it. There was my higher command questioned what I was doing, why I was doing it. But I think that the fact that the data spoke for itself. We had warriors coming back from war, and we were watching their lives fall apart. They were having marital problems, domestic abuse problems, substance abuse problems. All these problems were manifesting themselves, and that doesn't have to be. We don't just build a warrior for 1 or 2 deployments and then say, okay, go ahead and ruin the rest of your life. These are highly trained individuals that we need back in again. And going back to deployments, you could tell. A soldier did 1 deployment. They may or may not show the signs of stress within 3 to 6 months, maybe 9 months to 12 months. 3 or 4 deployments into it, they're showing it within 3 to 4 weeks. And so this was coming at us. So the ones who have been deployed a lot by 2010, we were very open-minded, and that happened to be some of the more senior people in the unit. And I think that helped lead the way for younger warriors to look at it and say, okay, if this is going to teach me how to perform at my very best when everything else is at the very worst, I'm open-minded. But again, prove it. and I think Amishi did.
Well, that's great. Perfect segue to my next question is for Amishi. When working with the military teams, we've just covered how we want to be high performers, and mindfulness is kind of seen as a soft practice, if you will. One, how did you adapt the traditional mindfulness practices to meet the military's needs? What adjustments needed to be made so that it would resonate? And then finally, what were your findings, and how long did it take? I mean, was it done in those 8 weeks?
Yeah, no, a lot of great questions, but I wanted to just again give you a little context of even who I am as a person. So
Please.
we've already been mentioning this notion of being a skeptical person who's like, yeah, I don't think so. Totally not for me. I might not look like it, but I'm actually a very skeptical person. And especially as an Indian woman, I was super anti, frankly, anything that smelled woo-woo or was not empirically based.
Wow.
And it was I particularly doubled down on that because I grew up in a culture where it was normative to practice meditation. In fact, some of my earliest memories are my dad meditating. And so it's not like I didn't know about it. I knew about it, and I was 100% rejecting it. So that notion of, and by the way, I'm a neuroscientist. So I was like, yeah, if there's no empirical basis, forget it. So it ended up that my orientation going into this was not like, oh, we're just going to apply this thing that's wonderful, and we're just going to give it to these people. It was more like, can we do something else other than this? I don't want to do anything like this. I don't want to do anything that's meditation related in my personal life. So with that orientation, you might think, well, how did you get here then? How did you end up being the person to want to bring meditation into these kind of different communities? And partly it was because holding those attitudes of resistance, of skepticism, I was suffering. And that was at a moment when very early in my career, where I had kind of a multitude of life circumstances, a new mom, as a new professor, and nothing else I was trying was working to help me manage my own attention. I was distracted, I was overwhelmed easily. I was not there for my family. So it's interesting to hear Walt talk about his relationship shifting with his children and his spouse, because I was in the same position, several years before, where I wasn't there with my life. And it was ironic because in my day job as a neuroscientist who studies attention, that is all I was thinking about, is how can you pay attention? How does attention work, et cetera. So I ended up opening up to mindfulness only because a very senior colleague of mine, somebody that is now since then well known, Richie Davidson, had just started doing work in mindfulness, and he was working with these long-term monastics at that point. And he had made a visit to my university at that point and was talking and had talked to me about it. And I was like, darn it, now I got to kind of pay attention to this thing. And maybe I even need to give it a try my own
to this
life.
thing. Listen to what you talk about it, right?
Yeah.
This thing. Oh my God. Right. It's true. This is how it goes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's very well known regarding his
Yeah.
seminal work on meditation and the brain. But
Right.
at that point, he wasn't even out and publicly talking about it yet. So it wasn't like it was known. And in fact, when he said the word meditation at this symposium, I was kind of like, we don't use those terms here. You're like, don't say that word. Like, it was very much not on my mind. Anyway, so now just to kind of answer your question, I opened up to it personally because I was like, okay, this person that I do respect is saying, give it a try. Yeah, I got my own hangups because of my own, feeling that aspects of my own culture that I thought were quite sexist didn't offer women the opportunity to practice at the same level as men. In fact, it was kind of the flip in Indian culture, where the strong, very masculine folks are the ones that get to practice this thing, and the women don't. So there's like all kinds of issues. I started practicing. And noticed, like Walt was describing, that very quickly I was more embodied in my own life, and realized that I was better able to pay attention to my children and my husband and my career. And at the same moments, we were studying in the lab all the things that made attention so powerful and some of the factors that were going to break attention. And these were things that were actually paralleling my own life. So you get people that come into the lab, they do these attentionally demanding tasks, and then you stress them out in the very controlled laboratory environments, or you threaten them and say, what's called psychosocial threat. Like, you're doing worse than every other student that's come in here. That's like a
Oof.
kind of a shock to the system. And we found that
Yeah.
reliably stressing people out, threatening them, putting them in a bad mood, having them recall negative memories in these pristine lab environments, reliably and repeatedly tanked attention. So on the one hand, we know attention's powerful. We're finding that it is being easily and consistently made fragile and vulnerable. And at the same time, we're in this post 9/11 era where, like, this is not just theoretical, like an ivory tower question. There are people that are going to experience stress, poor mood, and threat, and lives are on the line, whether that's healthcare workers or military service members or first responders. So I started becoming very interested in applying some kind of solution, which I didn't know at that point, to figuring out if we can protect and strengthen attention. And I happened to have just experienced the benefits of mindfulness myself. And I kind of connected the dots and said, hey, what if we try to bring these tools? And at that moment, nobody had ever formally done a large test of not only mindfulness in the military, but mindfulness and attention. So we were breaking new ground. After we started seeing that, yes, it does strengthen and protect attention, then I was like, let's take on the big guns, so to speak. Let's look at people that really need to be able to pay attention. So the approach, to answer your question, was a performance enhancement approach, because truly that is what I was interested in. And it was performing well in the face of stress, threat, negative mood. And if we could get people to do that, we wouldn't have to convince them at all, because I knew in my own life, if I'm able to do my job well, given the challenges I have, I will be intrinsically motivated to do it. So I'm going to pause there just to kind of give you a sense of like, this wasn't, I'm not like maybe your standard person at this moment in time where you might think, oh, they want to come and do nice things and bring mindfulness. I was like kind of dragged into it for a lot of different reasons.
But I would say though, we did, Mishi's like was one of the most intelligent people we'd ever met. So we couldn't understand her vocabulary, right? So she didn't speak soldier. So we did some work. I said, we can't talk to soldiers about slowly chewing a raisin. Soldiers dip Copenhagen, right?
And John's favorite exercise.
And they drink monster drinks, right? So we had to, but we did some work. It was, and quite frankly, I said, this is really like, push-ups for your mind. And that resonated with soldiers. And Mishi ran with it, and they would talk in language that maybe we would understand. Or like what you do with your weapon, you bore sight it or zero your weapon before you go on mission. So this is about zeroing your mind. And those kind of things resonated. She would do a lot of work to try to translate the scientific terms that may have went over our head or may have caused us to doubt or be skeptical. And she put a lot of it into our language that we understood, and performance was one of them. So did that over time. She kept working on that. I thought that was very helpful in communicating to the military.
Yeah.
Maybe I could follow up on that just to quickly say that it wasn't us trying to do it. It was realizing we don't know this community. We don't know the languaging. And knowing that it had to be in partnership. It had to be as a collaboration, because I don't want to impose anything. It will work if you impose something from the outside in. I'm not going to be the expert in knowing what the relevance is, what the appropriate terms are, what the right metaphors are, what the pressure points are, and lived experience. And so we'd already done that in the context of medical and nursing professionals, because I'm not a medical doctor either. And I'm not an athlete either. So we always partnered with the community that we were going to be working with to translate it in those terms. And the military was the same idea. What I really lucked out on, though, was to have partners, and Walt at the top of that list, who were willing to work with us. And literally asking Walt, at that point, I think you were, you might have already been a 3-star general, but to say, can you please come to our lab and spend a day with us? And we have these concepts. How can we translate that? And then benefiting from that wisdom, because it would be very obvious for him or others, in that position to know what to say. And what ended up happening that we realized, because we put it to the test, is that it's not just about languaging it right. It's about having people that already know the community be the trainers.
Yes,
and training them up to deliver it, and doing that in the most time efficient manner possible, because nobody's got time either. So we did a head-to-head where we took people that knew nothing about the military, trained them up on this contextualized program, and saw what happened there, and compared it to somebody who was a military trainer delivering the same program, and then looked at what happened if we did nothing at all. And what we ended up seeing is that nothing at all was bad. Soldiers started getting worse over time as they were preparing for pre-deployment. Everything was worse. Attention was worse. Mood was worse. And that's before they were deployed. The people that were trainers that knew nothing about the military and were delivering our program, unfortunately, were not well received. And the data looked like they were no different than getting no training at all. So it was entirely ineffective. But those that didn't know anything about mindfulness, but knew a lot about the community, were military trainers, were able to not only successfully deliver it, but the soldiers that received that training benefited. So they actually had stable attention, stable mood. And if they practiced more, they even got better in their attention and mood over those periods of time. So, what Walt's saying is deeply influenced the approach we took and the research that we've done to confirm that, you better language it so it's relevant, but you better have people that are able to deliver it in-house so that there's no need to have outsiders come in and do it.
Sure. The trust levels there.
Yeah.
What's the saying? Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
You'll just find a way. But also it's like one thing what we're all speaking to here about, there's the power of mindfulness but it's the essence, right? Or like our awareness is the essence of our human being. right? But it's like, how do you find a way to bring that forth, regardless of what circumstance? But obviously, in high stakes circumstances, we know that becoming more aware and of your emotions, of your actions, of your habits, of your feelings, right, makes a big difference when you're trying to perform at a high level. And how do you control that? And it's just and here we are talking about it, and it's like now it's spreading throughout the military, which is so wonderful. So it's so good. Yeah, John.
It is. Yeah. So, kind of continuing along that same thread for Walt, as mindfulness has started to gain traction in the military, we in the Navy have the Warrior Toughness program now in boot camp, which there's mindfulness is a big chunk of that. Have you encountered any challenges in balancing traditional training with these newer approaches to mental resilience?
I think the challenge remains for the Army and all the militaries. They've got a lot to do and very few time to do it. So anything that asks for time is going to be met with resistance and skepticism. It's
sure.
And so where it comes, that's why it was agree with Amishi that if we would have forced it on anybody, it would have died. So it came from the bottom up, and I think what folks realize is I have to do this. I have to put this into my training regimen. So for me, it's fairly easy. It's we do physical fitness training every single day, and every warrior in any branch of service, if they don't get that time, they're pretty angry. That's the last thing you take away from my daily schedule, because they know that it's performance enhancing for them. And if you just did something afterwards or before, it was the time was right there, and you really got to be able to exercise your body and your mind at the same time. So there's a lot out there, and I think there's a big race for folks. And you have to be cautious in the military, folks trying to sell you snake oil, right? I mean, there's a big race for all things mental health, suicide prevention. There's no silver bullet. We have to take care of one another, and we got to teach warriors how to take care of themselves. That's why this is. I think there's a tendency for people to want that next greatest thing, that miracle diet, that miracle mental health pill, that miracle this, miracle. It's not there. It's just we're born with so many given talents as human beings. We have so many great skills. You can't replace it, and you can't treat it with just technology. You've got to be able to do these very simple things to improve. And I think it comes back to that. So I think many of the armies and militaries across the world are catching on of the goodness of mindfulness. I think in my own army, I think we're a little too slow. I mean, it's 14 years I tried to bring mindfulness to the military. I feel successful in some ways, that I feel terribly like I failed the Army for not having it as widespread as it possibly could be. But it is I think the military has to be very careful when they select and double down on something. So they want to make sure it's right. But I think 14 years, we know it's right. The science is there. It's proven to us, how you fit it in, the methodology you use, that could be debatable, but the science can't. I think that's what Amishi's body of work has shown us. And we've always said, follow the science. I was happy, though. I will report out. I just came back from military installation on Tuesday. I visited Fort Liberty in North Carolina, home of our, the Army's elite forces and special operations forces. And I got to see physically a holistic health fitness center that the Army started to build at the brigade level, to get one per brigade. It looks kind of like a physical therapy room. Got a gymnasium, got a lot of equipment, but it's fit with dietitians, mental health expertise, unit ministry teams, fitness coaches, and we can diagnose and treat right on the spot. So warrior twist an ankle on a jump, he can go in and get treated right away. If she's having difficulties because something happened at home, or he's having difficulty because something they did during deployment, they get the help right there. And they're incorporating mindfulness techniques in some of their mental health and brain health options. And I see it here and see it within Wounded Warrior Project as well. We're incorporating this in it because we understand how important it is to help the warrior, come home after a tough service to our nation. As I say, it shouldn't be harder to come home from war than it is to go to war, but it is. Many don't make it home. That struggle is a different journey in of itself, and this has great application. So despite skepticism or just the bureaucratic inertia that might slow things down, the goodness of mindfulness, in my mind, it comes through because warriors get it. They feel it. They understand. It's like a good workout. you can't hold it back. If somebody's showing benefits from something, it's going to catch on. And I'm still optimistic that it will catch on at a much larger scale. I'm very pleased with where it has caught on with the military now. I just know it can do more because I know many, many warriors would benefit from it.
100%, 100%. And that's while they're in uniform and transitioning out. And that leads me to my next question, which you just mentioned there as CEO of the Wounded Warrior Project. What role do you see mindfulness playing in that role, in that part of the warrior's life, right? Helping veterans find that renewed purpose, renewed identity, renewed mission. How does mindfulness tie into that?
Well, right up front. And we're sending a team down to see Amishi's lab at University of Miami here. I think next week, right? Amishi, they're coming down, or a week out. And so, because I think we got to get smarter with it here, just with our organization and with the warriors we serve. So we in Wounded Warrior Project, we help rebuild lives that have been impacted by military service and war. That's noble work, but there's no linear solution to that. I mean, it's a tough thing, and we have many teammates within our organization that perhaps never served. So they feel like, well, this can't traumatize me. And yet I can see it in their faces and their eyes when they're helping these warriors try to make this transition in life, that it's tough. They're dealing with warriors who have done really, really tough things and having a real struggle, and it's sticking to them, and they need to understand it. They need to be aware. So I think this is going to benefit us in not just helping us deal with the stresses that we deal with daily, but helping us improve the quality of what we bring to a warrior to help bring them back home, and also helping with each other so that we can be good teammates, because we do win often. We get a warrior, we get them back on that path of hope and renewed purpose in life, but all too often we never get the warrior to begin with. And if we don't get them while they're still in uniform, they get out of uniform, sadly, they're going to fall into despair. They may be unemployed, lose their job, family breaks up, they may get evicted from the home. And all too often, we may find them, under a bridge with, a bottle or a gun in their mouth. And that can't be so. Our veterans are not a threat to our society, and they shouldn't be viewed as a burden to our society. They should be leaders in our society. So we're committed to that. So if we get them more, so I told the Army on Tuesday when I was at Fort Liberty, I told the Secretary and the Chief this and all the other services, we'll help you with that transition. We'd rather have a warrior while in uniform so we can help them transition. Our programs are free because America cares about their veterans, and they donate money so we can help our veterans make that transition. And in the long run, that saves our whole country a lot of money, that we get people that are willing to defend our freedom, and we get them out of the military service if they choose to do so, and we get them back into being leaders in society, because they know what's at stake if our society is not defended. So real proud to be on this side of the equation now, and being out of uniform, and get to try to help those who keep our nation free. And mindfulness is it is, because I'm here and I'm still practicing, plays a key part every day, that you recognize, you can see it in people's eyes, the stress that they're having just from the life burdens of transitioning or dealing with people that are transitioning. I'll say this. I talked to a teammate a couple days ago, military spouse, her husband, special operator, and he was wounded, several deployments, but one was wounded. And she said, he came back, this wasn't my husband, and I didn't recognize him. Now the wounds healed, the physical wounds healed, but the mental wounds didn't. She said it was hard. He was just a miserable, angry, bitter person. And she went through it all. And she was telling me that she did not recognize him. She goes, how could I, love him when I didn't even like him? And it's often this is what families go through. But what she said was, she goes, I decided to remember not what happened to him, but why it happened to him. That he was there to defend our freedom. That he cared about our family, our nation. That he would deploy in the most elite units in our military. And he came home like this. So what I decided to do is her words. I decided I was staying. And if he was going to do that for me and my country, I could do this for him. And by staying, she brought him home, and she got her husband back. And it's a powerful story, but you hear that. It's doctors in the military, they're going to save your life. I mean, we've saved lives in the most horrific places and almost dangerous circumstances, but they can't give you your life back. That's what we do. That's what we help with. We help warriors get their life back because they deserve it. And I think mindfulness plays a critical role in just being that self-awareness, that paying attention, being empathetic to another human being, and knowing that what it takes is beyond medicine or prescription. It's love and kindness and compassion, how powerful that can be in a warrior's journey home.
That's
Absolutely,
beautiful.
absolutely.
I mean,
And you mentioned you mentioned clearly that you guys are doing what you're doing for free for the veteran because of the donations of people like people who are donating. So, quick shameless plug for you all for the Wounded Warrior Project. For those listening, look them up, see the good things they're doing, and consider putting a donation in because of what it does for our veterans. So thank you for what you're doing there. And Will, sorry, I know you were going to ask something.
No. Amisha, like, so what's the next frontier of your research? I know you got a book coming out. Like, you're on the forefront of a lot of this work. It's like, how do you see it? What's the next? I mean, the next frontier is like, how do we discover more about mindfulness? Like, I'm excited to. Or can we? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the journey continues. So
Great.
I don't have a new book coming out, but my book has been out for about 3 years.
it's
and I have a new
her book. I'm sorry.
called Peak Mind, if anybody wants to check it out.
Yeah.
And hear a lot of the kind of powerful words from General Pyat, because he is a through line for the story of that book, which is about our journey really in the discoveries and the science of bringing mindfulness to different kinds of high demand communities. We're at a good moment, I would say, in many ways. And the next steps, I think, are very exciting because unlike that, first year I spent where I got a lot of no's, I'm getting a lot of yeses now. And a lot of people are coming to us asking for training. And so now I think my sense of what needs to happen is the responsibility has shifted. It's not about telling people mindfulness is something they should pay attention to. They do. Now it's about ensuring that what we give high demand, consequential people is scientifically backed, correct, and effective treatment. And frankly, and from my point of view, because I'm not a clinician, it's not about treatment, it's about training so that treatment is less and less likely to be needed. And so, for example, the kinds of work that we're doing now is from international militaries. I mean, there's a lot I could say, but I'll say two things. The first is that we have militaries from around the world that are now implementing mindfulness. So we've already been working with New Zealand and Australia. And right now there's a project that's happening in Ukraine because they knew of our work. And as the war was beginning, there were folks within that community, within that country that said, how can I give these tools to folks? And so we've been training them up to deliver. And it is heartbreaking and also kind of expanding to see the power of these tools in incredibly difficult circumstances. But the other thing I think is that I have, at least as a scientist, is a great sense of responsibility. If you're going to give somebody a set of training tools before they're going to be deployed, those better be correct, meaning the threshold for what those practices are, how much you're asking them to practice, what you're asking them to do should all be vetted and known to be correct. That has been a challenge because as mindfulness has become more and more popular in our culture, everybody thinks that they're mindfulness experts, that anything you do is good stuff. And that is not the case, unfortunately. There are things that people can be told to do that may not be appropriate or enough to actually help with the kind of demanding circumstances. So that's the pursuit that my lab has been on, is like, let's not just determine if it's beneficial, but let's ensure that it's relevant, feasible, time efficient, supported by leadership, and able to be self-sustained within the systems that we work with. So all of our approaches involve the same sort of methodology, but we empower the organization itself to keep it alive with the right standards of effectiveness. And the biggest exciting project I've got coming up is that the special operations community has embraced this approach. They're actually probably further along than any other community, where mindfulness is everywhere within that community. But there's a downside to that, which is that you go from one assignment to another, and what is called mindfulness can be very different. So what they've asked us to do, we just got a big grant that, I'll be starting hopefully this spring to bring it sort of SOCOM wide, Special Operations Command wide, so that we train trainers that will not only be able to deliver it in these various contexts, but then they can train other trainers and it can be self-sustained. They can go off and do whatever they want beyond that initial training, but it gives everybody the same foundational playing field that says this is the standard of what you need to achieve. Launch point from
Right.
that is your choice, but make sure you do the thing that is going to be appropriate for this community.
Wow. Yeah.
So
It
it's
sounds
an
like, John,
exciting
you're going to
thing
be
for
back.
people. Yeah.
No, it's very exciting. John, you're going to be back in the military training people in mindfulness. So, train the trainers.
That would be a
Anyway,
dream. That would be a dream.
I
I'll tell
know,
you
right?
what.
Probably. I'm throwing it out there. We're throwing it out there, John.
Well,
Well,
I want to respect both of y'all's time. Thank you, so much for what you've shared with us thus far. It's been incredible, and the work that you guys are doing and continue to do is hugely impactful on the lives, the hearts, the minds of our active duty and our veterans. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for coming on the show. Will, anything last before I do our closing practice?
No, I just want to, thank you both. And it's really exciting to hear what's coming next. I think there does need to be, and especially it's going to be like kind of, battle tested, for lack of a better term right now. That like actual training, like this is like how to really incorporate mindfulness into a human being, in a way that is very effective, but, at that core level of what mindfulness is really about. And it's really about helping us to be, just better human beings, better operators, optimize like from the inside out, and not always working from the head space, but working also from the heart, from the body, and that's where a lot of the instincts are. That's where a lot of our brilliance is as well. So I'm really excited for that. I'm going to definitely pick up your book too. So thank you.
Yeah. Actually, can I say one thing before, John?
Yeah.
I mentioned this before you do our closing practice. The other really exciting thing is the military's own embrace of the, science-based, research-backed approach. And about a year and a half ago, the DoD approached me about taking the practices that in a program that I had described at the end of my book and turning it into an app that could be then more
Boom.
accessible for folks and
How
then given
cool.
back to all service members at no cost. And then actually we'll be able to give it to other people too. I guess I sell it in the App Store to other people too. But
Yeah, right.
in a couple of weeks, it'll be coming out. And you heard
Oh, super cool.
General Pyat is definitely part of this as well. The app is
Great.
called Push-Ups for the Mind.
There you go. Yeah,
And
you
it's
said that
all
earlier.
around this number 12 minutes of practicing about 12 minutes a day, and about shooting for about 4 days a week, in the variety of practices that we've found over and over again in our research are effective at improving not only attention, mood, and our relationships, but performance as well. So just be on a
Wow.
lookout for that, because we want anybody that's a service member to be able to access that as soon as it's available.
Oh, Amishi, please let us know when it's out.
Send
I'm
it
going to spread
over.
the word as far as I
Yeah.
can, far and wide, because of how much we believe in these practices. So
Yeah.
that's
And
amazing.
let us know how we can help
Congrats.
you guys. Seriously. Like, let us know how we can help you guys. Sorry, John, but we're closing
No,
now.
good. So yeah, amazing. Congratulations on that. And I'll wrap it
Yeah.
up with, we're just going to do another one breath practice. As you both well know, one breath is not enough, but it at least grounds us
It's
here
a
and
good
now.
start.
So it's a good start. So let's go ahead and begin with an exhale, emptying out all the way and holding empty for a second. And now taking a long, slow, deep breath in, holding at the top and releasing. And as you release, bring some movement back into your body, rolling your shoulders and just being present in your body in this here and now. And Amishi, Walt, thank you both so much again. This has been fantastic. We really appreciate it. Will, again, over to you, my friend.
I'm feeling a lot of gratitude in that breath, a lot of gratitude for being here with us today and helping us, and all of us together to spread, the word of mindfulness, because of how incredibly powerful it is. And I really wish you guys all the best. And we do mean it. Like, we're growing as a podcast, and we're creating a larger community and platform and stuff like that. So anything we can do to help you get the word out, and if you need to come back on the show, let us anytime. We'd love to have you on. Please.
Indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And that's
All right.
it. I think we're good.
Until next time, for our audience, take care. Peace.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Peace. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.